The Earthship Valkyrie was lost for over 2 centuries. It had disappeared during humanity's first major expedition beyond the solar system, swallowed by the void of space with no distress signals, no debris, no trace of its fate. Generations later, it had become a legend, a mystery told in hushed tones among spacefarers and historians alike. Then, without warning, Valkyrie returned. It reappeared on the edge of the Sol system, broadcasting ancient Earth frequencies. The ship was intact, pristine even, as if it had never been gone at all. No signs of decay, no battle scars, no distress calls. Just a ghost ship emerging from the darkness, as if stepping back into reality from a place that had no right to exist. Earth's Space Command scrambled. The United Terran Authority, UTA, dispatched its finest fleet, not out of welcome, but out of fear. This was impossible. The laws of physics didn't allow for a ship to vanish for 200 years and return without aging a single day. Something was wrong. Aboard the command ship Triumphant, Admiral Rhea Donovan observed Valkyrie through the bridge viewport, her sharp blue eyes scanning its hull. The design was outdated, yet untouched by time. A creeping unease settled in her gut. "Open a channel," she ordered, a burst of static. Then a voice, calm, unwavering. "This is Captain Elias Kane of the Valkyrie, requesting permission to dock." Donovan's crew exchanged glances. Captain Elias Kane had vanished 200 years ago. His name was carved into memorials. His family had long since turned to dust. "Confirm your identity," Donovan said. A pause. Then, "Admiral, I know this is difficult to believe, but I assure you, we are the Valkyrie. And we have returned with knowledge that will change everything." That was when the scans came in. The ship's power signature was wrong. It didn't run on fusion, antimatter, or any known technology. The energy it emitted was beyond anything humanity had ever seen. It bent the rules of physics, defied logical explanation, and it was growing stronger. "Admiral," the sensor officer whispered, his face pale. "That ship isn't just powered by something unknown. It's rewriting the space around it. Reality is bending." A shiver crawled down Donovan's spine. She gripped the edge of her command chair. "Captain Kane," she said, voice steady. "Where have you been?" Another pause. Then Kane's voice came through, edged with something unreadable. "We were taken, and now we've brought back a gift. But not all gifts are meant to be given." The screen flickered. The stars outside seemed to shift. And then, something inside the Valkyrie moved. The Valkyrie remained eerily still in space, but its presence was anything but passive. The reality around it shimmered, as if the very fabric of space was uncertain whether the ship should exist. Admiral Donovan took a deep breath. She had commanded fleets in battle, held the line against pirate incursions, even witnessed first contact with an alien species. But this was something entirely different. "Launch a probe," she ordered. A small, automated drone detached from the Triumphant and glided toward Valkyrie. The crew held their breath as the probe neared the lost ship. Its instruments flickered wildly, unable to process what it was detecting. Then, without warning, the probe simply vanished. Not destroyed, not intercepted. One moment it was there, and the next, it wasn't. A collective silence filled the bridge. Donovan clenched her fists. "Captain Kane," she said through the comms, forcing steel into her voice. "What happened to my probe?" Kane's response came after a pause, his voice measured, but carrying an undercurrent of something almost human, yet not quite. "It's still here," he said, "just not in a way you can perceive." A shiver crawled down Donovan's spine. "Explain." Kane sighed. "Admiral, I don't know how to put it in words that will make sense to you. What I can say is this: Where we went, time doesn't move the way you think. Space isn't what you believe it to be. We learned things, saw things, and now we've come back." His voice grew quieter. "But we are not the same." Donovan exchanged glances with her officers. Some looked terrified, others intrigued. But the underlying truth was clear. No one knew what they were dealing with. "Captain Kane, I need a straight answer," she pressed. "Where did you go?" A deep, heavy silence stretched between them. Then, Kane finally spoke. "We were taken beyond the veil of what humans call reality, past the observable universe, past physics, past understanding." He exhaled slowly. "We met something there, Admiral, something ancient, something that exists in ways we cannot comprehend. It did not speak in words. It did not communicate as we do. It simply was. And it showed us things." His voice trembled ever so slightly. "We have returned with knowledge, with technology. But it comes at a price." Donovan narrowed her eyes. "What price?" Kane hesitated. Then, the lights on the Triumphant flickered. The stars outside the viewport seemed to pulse, and from deep within the Valkyrie, something began to whisper. The whisper wasn't sound in the traditional sense. It bypassed the ears entirely, slipping directly into the mind. A murmur, layered with 1,000 overlapping voices, speaking in a language that had no words. Donovan's breath caught in her throat. Around her, officers tensed, some clutching their heads, others going rigid in their seats. The whisper wasn't just noise, it was thought. It crawled through their brains like an invasive presence, slipping past mental defenses with unnatural ease. "Shut it off!" she barked, though she had no idea how. One of her officers gasped, his pupils dilated. "It's speaking to us. No, showing us." His voice broke into a choked sob as blood dribbled from his nose. Donovan gritted her teeth and turned back to the comms. "Captain Kane," she snapped. "What the hell is happening?" Kane's voice came through the speakers, disturbingly calm. "It's trying to understand you, Admiral, the same way it understood us. Don't resist." "Resist what?" she hissed. A shudder passed through the Triumphant, as if space itself trembled around them. The whispering intensified. A flood of foreign thoughts clawed at the edges of Donovan's mind, images flickering too fast to comprehend. Impossible structures, infinite darkness, something moving behind reality. She clenched her jaw, forcing the intrusive thoughts away. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. "Cut the transmission," she ordered. The comms officer scrambled to comply, but his hands froze mid-motion. His body went rigid, eyes wide and unfocused. His mouth moved, but the voice that came out was not his own. "You called us back." The voice rumbled through the bridge, layered, alien, yet eerily familiar. Donovan's blood ran cold. "Who am I speaking to?" The comms officer's lips twisted into an unnatural smile. "We are the ones who watched as they stepped beyond the veil. We are the witnesses. And now, we are here." The whispering grew louder. Shapes flickered in the space around the Valkyrie. Shadows where there should be none. Donovan gripped the armrest of her chair. "What do you want?" The thing wearing her officer's voice chuckled. "Want? We do not want, Admiral. We simply are, and soon, so shall you be." The Valkyrie began to change. Its hull rippled, as though reality itself was uncertain of its shape. Strange, geometric patterns unfolded and collapsed in impossible ways, stretching beyond the visible spectrum. The ship was wrong, existing in ways that defied understanding. And then, Donovan realized with a sickening certainty, the Valkyrie wasn't a ship anymore. It was something else. The Valkyrie twisted, its form warping like a reflection on disturbed water. Donovan's stomach churned as the once solid hull flickered between shapes, angles that didn't belong, shifting in ways her brain struggled to process. The whispering had grown into a chorus, resonating deep within her skull, pressing against the fragile walls of her sanity. Her officers were in varying states of distress. Some clutched their heads, others trembled in their seats, and a few simply stared, slack-jawed, as if their minds had already broken under the weight of what they were perceiving. "Stand down," Donovan ordered, her voice sharper than the terror clawing at her insides. "No one engages, no weapons, no comms. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." The words tasted hollow even to her. She had faced unknown threats before. Pirates, rogue AI, even first contact scenarios. But this was different. This wasn't an enemy that could be outmaneuvered or a situation that could be reasoned with. This was something else. Something that had dragged itself back from beyond human comprehension, wearing the skin of the Valkyrie. And now it was staring at them. The comms officer, no, the thing that had taken hold of him, tilted its head. His eyes were pools of ink, reflecting the cold emptiness of space. "Your minds are small, fragile, but you will expand, as they have." Donovan stepped forward, leveling a glare at the possessed officer. "Expand into what, exactly?" The thing smiled, an unnatural stretch of lips. "Into what you're meant to be." Before she could respond, the ship's sensors shrieked with warning. The space around the Valkyrie was distorting, as if reality itself was peeling apart. Threads of something dark and shifting coiled outward from the ship, reaching, searching. And then, one of the escort frigates vanished. Gone. No explosion, no debris. 1 second it was there, the next it was as if it had never existed at all. Gasps filled the bridge. A tactical officer slammed his hands on the console, frantically searching for an explanation. "Admiral, the Calypso just disappeared. No energy signature, no wreckage, nothing." Donovan's jaw clenched. "What the hell just happened?" "It has begun," the possessed officer murmured. "The unraveling." A deep, terrible pressure filled the bridge, pressing against them like an unseen force. The stars outside the viewport stretched and blurred, bending around the Valkyrie like space itself was caving in. Then, the ship spoke again. But not through the comms, not through the officer. This time it spoke directly into their minds. "You are limited." The words were not words. They were thoughts, invading without permission, slithering into the very foundation of Donovan's consciousness. "But you do not have to be." She gritted her teeth, forcing the voice out, but it was relentless. She could feel it prying at the edges of her perception, showing her glimpses of something vast, something incomprehensible. A place beyond the known universe. A realm of shifting voids and impossible light, where time had no meaning and existence was not bound by matter. The Valkyrie had not merely disappeared, it had been taken. And now it had returned, no longer a ship, but a conduit. Donovan gasped as she snapped back to reality, her knees nearly giving out beneath her. The whispering had stopped. The ship was silent once more, but the damage was done. She could still feel the weight of the Valkyrie's presence pressing at the edges of her mind, like an unanswered question gnawing at her sanity. She turned sharply to her crew. "Status report." The officers scrambled to recover, but their faces were pale, sweat beading on their brows. The tactical officer swallowed hard before speaking. "Admiral, we've lost all long-range communications. Subspace relays are offline. And the Calypso—" He hesitated, staring at his screen as if hoping the answer would change. "It's not just gone. It's been erased. No records, no traces. As if it was never there." Donovan clenched her fists. Whatever had come back with the Valkyrie wasn't just dangerous, it was rewriting reality itself. She turned back to the comms, her voice hard as steel. "Captain Kane, if you're still in there, you need to listen to me." For a long moment there was silence. Then Kane's voice returned. But it was different now. Hollow. "Admiral Donovan?" A pause. "You shouldn't have come here." And then the Valkyrie moved. The Valkyrie didn't accelerate in any conventional sense. It didn't fire thrusters or engage a warp drive. Instead, space itself bent around it, folding like a sheet of paper being creased in unseen hands. One moment, the lost ship was a ghostly silhouette against the void, ominous, waiting. The next, it was everywhere. The bridge of the Triumphant erupted in chaos. Alarms blared, warning of impossible gravitational fluctuations. Screens flickered between static and unreadable data streams. Officers shouted conflicting reports, their voices tinged with disbelief and terror. Donovan clutched the armrest of her chair as a deep, gut-wrenching pull dragged through her body, like gravity had turned inside out. And then, everything stretched. For the briefest, most agonizing instant, Donovan felt herself being pulled apart, her atoms unraveling, her mind expanding beyond its fragile human constraints. She saw beyond. She saw them. Vast, unseeable shapes looming in a realm without boundaries. Entities that existed outside of time, each a titanic presence made of unknowable geometry, shifting in ways her brain screamed were impossible. Their attention turned toward her. No, toward humanity, and she understood, with the clarity of someone standing at the edge of an abyss, that they had been watching. Watching as the Valkyrie trespassed, watching as it returned. And now, watching her, her consciousness snapped back into her body like a rubber band snapping against flesh. She gasped, collapsing forward, her vision swimming. Around her, the bridge crew was in shambles, some unconscious, others crying, a few curled into fetal positions, whispering to themselves. The possessed comms officer sat unnervingly still. "You have seen," the thing inside him murmured. "You begin to understand." Donovan forced herself to stand. Her legs felt like lead, her stomach roiling, but she had to push through. She turned to the tactical officer. "What the hell just happened?" His hands trembled as he checked his readings. "Admiral, I don't know how to explain this, but the Valkyrie, it didn't move. It folded space around itself. It exists in multiple places at once now. It's everywhere and nowhere." Donovan's blood ran cold. "And our fleet?" The officer swallowed hard. "The Calypso wasn't the only one. We lost the Resolute and Harbinger, too. Same thing. Just gone. Not destroyed. Just erased." The room spun. 3 ships. Hundreds of people. Erased from existence. A sickening realization settled over her. They weren't fighting an enemy in the traditional sense. There were no weapons to aim, no defenses to raise. They were standing at the precipice of something far greater than themselves, staring into the abyss. And the abyss was responding. The possessed officer, no, the thing inside him, spoke again. "You should leave." Donovan narrowed her eyes. "And if we don't?" For the first time, the thing laughed. A sound that didn't belong in a human throat. "Then you will become what we have become." Behind him, the Valkyrie twisted again, its form flickering, warping. And Donovan suddenly knew. Kane and his crew were already gone. The Valkyrie wasn't a ship anymore. It was an invitation. And it was waiting for someone to step through. Donovan's pulse pounded in her ears. The Valkyrie loomed ahead, no longer just a ship, but a doorway, an anomaly wrapped in the shattered remains of what had once been human engineering. It pulsed, its surface shifting like liquid metal, flickering between states of reality her mind struggled to comprehend. She inhaled sharply. "We are leaving." But even as she said the words, she knew it wasn't that simple. "Navigation. Get us out of here now," she ordered. The officer at the helm didn't respond. His fingers hovered over the controls, unmoving. His eyes were distant, pupils dilated, lips slightly parted. "Lieutenant," she snapped. Still no reaction. A ripple of unease swept through the bridge. Then, the whispering returned. Soft at first, like wind through dry leaves. Then louder, clawing. "Stay." The word wasn't spoken. It bloomed directly in their minds, invasive and undeniable. Donovan clenched her jaw, fighting against the presence. "Get us out of here!" The navigation officer twitched violently and gasped, as if surfacing from deep water. His hands flew over the controls, initiating emergency FTL procedures. But nothing happened. The Triumphant didn't move. "FTL drive is locked," the lieutenant stammered, panic creeping into his voice. "Something's holding us here." Donovan's hands curled into fists. "Override it." I'm trying," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not responding. Admiral, I think—" A pulse rippled out from the Valkyrie, distorting space like a pebble dropped in a pond. The ship screamed, not with sound, but with raw thought, an intrusion into every living mind within reach. The officers around her collapsed. Some convulsed, others simply slumped in their seats, eyes rolling back, faces slack. Donovan's head pounded, her vision darkening at the edges as the presence pressed deeper. Images flickered. She saw Kane, standing somewhere that was not the bridge of his ship. He was alone in an expanse of shifting dark, surrounded by impossible shapes, his body flickering between flesh and something else. His eyes glowed with unnatural light, his expression serene. And then he turned, staring directly at her, not through a screen, not through a comms channel. He was in her mind. "Admiral," Kane's voice echoed in her skull, impossibly close. "You don't have to fight this." She gritted her teeth. "Like hell I don't. You still think in limits, in before and after, in here and there." His expression softened, almost pitying. "But there's only one truth now, expansion, understanding. We have become, Admiral. And you can too." The whispers twisted into something deeper. An offer. She could feel it, seeping into her thoughts like ink in water. A promise of something greater, something beyond mere human existence. For the briefest moment, she felt it. A vastness, a liberation from time, from space, from the constraints of her flesh. She could join them, she could see, and then she ripped herself away. The bridge snapped back into view. Her officers were still unconscious or groaning on the floor. The Triumphant was still frozen in place. The Valkyrie was still waiting. Donovan drew a shaky breath. "No." Kane tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Why do you resist?" She steadied herself, eyes hard as steel. "Because I'm human, and I'm taking my people home." For the first time, Kane's face shifted, an expression she recognized. Disappointment. "So be it." The Valkyrie pulsed again, and the stars shattered. The universe fractured. For a breathless, horrifying moment, the stars around them twisted like glass under immense pressure, breaking into jagged splinters of light. Space itself seemed to groan. A deep, resonant sound that wasn't sound at all, but something deeper, something felt in the bones. The Triumphant shuddered violently. Donovan braced against the command chair as the deck beneath her feet tilted, like reality itself was losing its grip. Officers screamed. Some collapsed, their eyes rolling back as the pressure of the moment crushed them. Others clutched at their ears, though there was nothing audible to hear. only the suffocating weight of something other pressing into their minds. The Valkyrie pulsed again, and the world changed. One instant, Donovan was standing on the bridge of her flagship. The next, she was somewhere else. Darkness, a void that stretched infinitely in all directions, filled with shifting, writhing shapes she couldn't quite see. She gasped, instinctively reaching for her sidearm, only to realize her body wasn't entirely there. She existed, but not in the way she should have. Her form wavered, flickering between substance and something else, something unrecognizable. For a terrifying second, she feared she was losing herself, becoming like the Valkyrie, like Cain. But then she focused. She forced herself back into coherence, tightening her will like a clenched fist. And the void rippled. Something noticed her. A massive presence loomed ahead, unfathomable in its scale. It wasn't a ship, nor a creature. It was something in between. A force, a mind, a presence, and it spoke, not with words, not even with thought. It imprinted. "You are not ready." Donovan staggered under the weight of the meaning behind the message. The words burrowed into her skull, pressing against the limits of human comprehension. She gritted her teeth, fighting to stay herself. "Then let us go!" she snarled. The presence shifted, considered. The void around her twisted, bending like liquid. And suddenly, she was back. The bridge of the Triumphant snapped into existence around her. The alarms were still blaring. Officers groaned as they pulled themselves upright. Screens flickered with corrupted data, but they were still here. The Valkyrie remained before them, but something had changed. The gravitational distortions ceased. The whispering vanished. And then, without warning, the Valkyrie folded inward on itself. No explosion, no final message, no grand confrontation. Just an eerie, silent collapse, as if space itself was rewriting history to erase what had never belonged. And then, it was gone. Donovan exhaled slowly, realizing she had been holding her breath. The Valkyrie was no more, or perhaps it had never been. "Status?" she managed. The tactical officer, still shaking, scanned the readouts. "FTL is back online. Navigation systems responding. The gravitational anomalies are gone." They were free. Donovan slumped into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. They had survived. But as she stared at the now empty space where the Valkyrie had been, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. They had seen something they were never meant to see. And somewhere, something had seen them back. The Triumphant drifted in eerie silence, its systems stabilizing but the crew still shaken. Donovan's breath was steady, but her thoughts churned. The Valkyrie was gone. But that didn't mean they were safe. She turned to her officers, trying to gauge the damage. Some were still dazed, others blinking as if waking from a nightmare. The whispering was gone, but the weight of what had happened lingered in the air like the aftershock of an explosion. "Lieutenant, confirm ship integrity," she ordered. The young officer swallowed hard, his hands flying over the controls. "Hull integrity. Stable. All systems are responding, but we have massive sensor corruption. It's like they recorded too much and can't process it all." Donovan frowned. That made an unsettling kind of sense. Whatever had happened with the Valkyrie, it had broken reality for a moment. Their systems, their minds, had glimpsed something beyond human comprehension. "How long to get the fleet operational?" The chief engineer, a veteran with a face carved by years of war, wiped a trickle of sweat from his brow. "The Triumphant is functional, but we lost 3 ships." His voice was raw. "They didn't just go offline. They were removed." Donovan clenched her jaw. The Calypso, the Resolute, the Harbinger, hundreds of people gone. No wreckage, no distress beacons. Just erased, like they had never existed. "And Cain," She exhaled sharply, suppressing the flicker of guilt in her gut. Kane had been lost long before this battle ended. The man was gone. What had spoken to her had been something else. "Start running deep system scans," she said. "If there's anything left of those ships—" A new alarm chimed. "Incoming transmission," the comms officer said, voice tight with disbelief. "Encrypted, Priority 1 code." Donovan's brow furrowed. "From who?" The officer hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "The Calypso." Silence swallowed the bridge. Everyone knew what they had seen. The Calypso had been wiped from existence, yet somehow, impossibly, it was transmitting. "Patch it through," Donovan said, forcing steel into her voice. The screen crackled with static. At first there was nothing, just empty interference. Then, a voice, distorted, faint. "Admiral Van, come in." The crew stiffened. Donovan's hands curled into fists. It was Kane's voice, but it wasn't him. Something was wrong. "Kane," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Where are you?" A pause. Then the signal warped. What had started as Kane's voice shifted, becoming layered, many voices speaking at once. "We are here," it said. "We are beyond. We are waiting." Donovan's spine turned to ice. She had fought aliens, seen entire planets burn. But this was something worse. The signal shifted again, and for a split second, the view screen showed something. A shadow. A massive, impossible shape moving through a void blacker than space itself. Then, static. Then, nothing. The transmission cut out. The bridge was silent. Then, the navigator whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Admiral, where's the nearest star supposed to be?" Donovan's blood went cold. She turned to the viewport, and her stomach dropped. The Triumphant was still in space. The wreckage of their lost fleet still drifted around them. But ahead, where the nearest star should have been, there was nothing. No light, no warmth, just a black, yawning absence. Like something had eaten it, the whispering in her mind had stopped. But somehow Donovan knew. They weren't alone. Donovan stared into the abyss where a star should have been. The void before them wasn't just empty. It was wrong. Space wasn't supposed to look like that. Even in the deepest reaches of the void, there was always some distant pinprick of light, some background radiation, some evidence of something. But ahead of them? Nothing. No readings, no gravitational pull, no time distortion. It was as if the laws of physics themselves refused to acknowledge what lay in front of them. The bridge crew was frozen in place, staring at the void as if it might suddenly look back. Donovan forced her hands to remain steady as she gripped the arms of her command chair. "Long-range scans," she ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to know exactly what we're looking at." The sensor officer hesitated before responding. His fingers trembled as he worked, and the moment he looked at his screen, his face drained of color. He swallowed. "Admiral, the sensors aren't detecting anything. It's not just empty space, it's like—" He hesitated, as if afraid to say it aloud. "Like what? Like there was never anything there to begin with?" A chill crawled up Donovan's spine. "That's impossible," she said. The officer shook his head. "It's like whatever was here before stopped existing." Donovan turned to the comms officer. "Try raising command. We need to report this." He nodded quickly, hands moving over the controls. A moment later, his face twisted in confusion. "Admiral, there's no response." The silence on the bridge grew heavier. "Try again," Donovan said, keeping her voice level. The officer tried again. Then again. His fingers moved faster, breath coming quicker. Finally, he turned to her, eyes wide with barely restrained panic. "There's nothing out there, Admiral. No response from Fleet Command. No response from any colonies, relay stations, or outposts. It's like the entire network is just gone." Donovan's chest tightened. That wasn't possible. Even in the worst-case scenario, an enemy attack, a catastrophic failure, there would still be something. A distress signal, debris, a transmission, anything. But there was only silence. Her gaze drifted back to the viewport, to the absence where a star should have been. Then, from the shadows, a whisper crawled through her mind. "You are alone." She clenched her teeth, forcing the voice away. "No," she growled under her breath. They weren't alone. Something had done this. Something was here, and it was waiting. She turned sharply to her officers. "All crew to battle stations. I want full system checks, weapons online, and FTL spooled. Whatever this is, we're not going to sit here and let it take us." The crew snapped into motion, the tension breaking as everyone focused on their tasks. Donovan felt it too, that old survival instinct, the one that had kept her alive through war and disaster. She didn't know what they were dealing with, but she knew one thing. They had to get out of here. Now the navigation officer's hands flew over his console, inputting jump coordinates. FTL drive engaging in 10 seconds. Then, the ship lurched. Not like a weapon strike, not like turbulence. It felt like something had grabbed them. And then, from the depths of the void, something moved. A shape, vast beyond comprehension. Not a ship, not a creature, something else. Something that should not exist. The void blinked, and then it swallowed them whole. There was no sensation of movement, no acceleration, no pull of inertia. The triumphant was simply somewhere else. Donovan's breath hitched as the viewport flickered, adjusting to their new surroundings, or lack thereof. Gone were the wrecked ships, gone was the starless abyss, gone was everything they had ever known. They were adrift in an ocean of pure black. Not space, not void, something worse. "Status!" Donovan barked, trying to steady herself. The bridge crew scrambled. Readouts glitched. Systems stuttered, struggling to process their new reality. The sensor officer paled, shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know how to explain this, Admiral." His voice was raw with fear. "According to our instruments, we're nowhere." The words sent a sickening wave through Donovan's gut. She turned to navigation. "FTL status?" The officer tried to answer, but no words came. He simply turned the screen toward her. Her stomach dropped. The triumphant wasn't moving. Couldn't move, because according to their navigational systems, there was nothing to move toward. No coordinates, no star charts, no reference points. They weren't just lost, they had been removed. Donovan clenched her jaw. This wasn't over. It couldn't be over. "Do we have power?" she asked. The engineer nodded. "Yes, but, Admiral, I don't think our engines are connected to anything. It's like trying to push against air, but there's no ground beneath us." The comms officer swallowed. "Admiral, we're getting another transmission." The bridge fell into an unnatural silence. Donovan turned to him slowly. "From where?" The officer shook his head, eyes filled with barely contained terror. "I don't know, but it's coming in on every channel. Audio only." The whispering in her head returned. "We are waiting." She gritted her teeth. "Patch it through." The speakers crackled, and then a voice, but not one voice, thousands, layered atop each other, shifting, morphing, weaving together into something that was neither human nor alien. It was like listening to existence itself, trying to speak. "You have seen beyond." Donovan's hands curled into fists. "You have stepped where you do not belong." The bridge crew stood frozen, barely breathing. You will not return. A chill settled deep into Donovan's bones. She forced herself to speak. Who are you? The voice did not hesitate. We are the boundary, the veil, the final whisper before nothingness. Her throat went dry. What do you want? For a long, stretched moment, there was no answer. Then, finally, you are human. A pause. A flaw in the pattern. The words carried weight, pressing down on the bridge like a physical force. The whispering in her skull grew louder. You are not meant to exist. Donovan's breath came slow and measured, her pulse pounding in her ears. We exist, she said, forcing steel into her voice, and we're not going anywhere. The void around them shifted. The shape that had swallowed them stirred. The voice spoke again, softer this time. We will see. And then, the triumphant plunged, not through space, not through time, through something else entirely. And for the first time in her life, Admiral Donovan knew what it truly meant to be afraid. The triumphant fell, not in the way a ship falls toward a planet, or the way a body falls in gravity's grip. No, this was different. It was as if reality itself had cracked open beneath them, and they were tumbling through something that was neither space nor time, but a concept. An idea of movement, of descent, into something far beyond human understanding. The viewport showed nothing but shifting darkness, colors that shouldn't exist bleeding through the void, twisting and writhing. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of being somewhere it was never meant to be. Donovan gritted her teeth as the pressure pressed against her skull, her thoughts unraveling at the edges. The whispers grew louder, not just in her mind, but in the air itself, vibrating through the ship's walls. You do not belong. She forced herself to move, to think. Status, she barked. The bridge crew were clutching their heads, struggling to focus. The engineer was hunched over his console, sweat dripping from his brow. Admiral, I don't know what's happening. The ship is intact, but we're not moving in any way that makes sense. The navigator's hands trembled over his controls. FTL is still non-functional. Sublight engines are useless. It's like we're being pulled by something that doesn't obey physics. Donovan turned to comms. What about the transmission? The officer hesitated, eyes flicking between her and his console. It's changing. The whispering deepened, voices overlapping, distorting. Then, a new voice cut through the madness, a human voice. Triumphant, come in. Donovan's pulse spiked. Who is this? She snapped. A pause. Then a voice she had not expected to hear again. Admiral, it's Kane. Her fingers clenched into the armrests of her chair. That's impossible. I know, Kane's voice said, but you need to listen to me. If you don't, none of you are getting out of here alive. A chill crawled down her spine. This thing, whatever had spoken to her before, whatever had worn Kane's voice in that last transmission, was it still him, or was it something else? Prove it's you, she said. Silence. Then, you hate coffee. You only drink tea. Black, no sugar. You pretend it's because of taste, but really, it's because your father drank it that way, and you haven't let yourself admit that's the reason. Donovan's breath caught. No one knew that. Not her crew, not even Kane, not when he was alive, and yet, somehow he knew now. Her heart pounded. Where are you? Another pause. Then Kane's voice softened. I'm where you're going. And just as he spoke, the ship stopped falling. Reality snapped back into place, and before them, filling the viewport, was something impossible. The Triumphant stood still, not in space, not in time, but in something else entirely. Through the viewport, Donovan saw it. A structure, no, a construct, a monument built from the bones of a dead reality, vast beyond comprehension. It stretched in all directions, a cyclopean labyrinth of twisting corridors and impossible angles, like a derelict city that had never been built to house life. It looked wrong. Not in the way ruins look abandoned, but in the way something looks when it was never meant to exist at all. The whispers faded. The oppressive weight in her skull lessened, like a hand slowly lifting from her throat. But the unease remained. Because somehow, deep in her gut, Donovan knew, this place had been waiting for them. The bridge was silent, except for the hum of machinery. The crew were frozen in place, staring at the thing before them. Finally, Kane's voice crackled over the comms again. "You need to listen to me, Donovan." Her grip on the chair's arms tightened. "Where the hell are we?" "The boundary." Kane's voice was steady. "The place where reality ends. The last wall between existence and something else." A shiver ran through her. "You're saying this place, is what's stopping us from falling into whatever's beyond it?" "Yes. And what the hell is beyond it?" A long silence. Then, "Something that should never wake up." The words settled like lead in her stomach. She turned to her crew. "Get me a full scan of that structure. I want to know everything. Size, composition, energy signatures, anything." The sensor officer hesitated, then started working. His fingers trembled slightly. A few moments passed. Then his face twisted in confusion. "Admiral," he said, voice shaking. "This thing, it's not a structure, it's organic." The words barely had time to register before the Triumphant's lights flickered. A warning siren blared. The construct moved. And then, a single massive eye opened at the heart of the structure. It had seen them, and something deep within it began to wake up. The moment the eye opened, reality shuddered. A pulse rippled outward from the massive construct, a wave of something that wasn't energy, wasn't gravity, wasn't anything human minds were meant to understand. The Triumphant groaned under the force of it, and for the first time in her career, Admiral Donovan felt something she had sworn never to feel in command. Helplessness. The ship's systems flickered wildly, screens glitched, the artificial gravity fluctuated. A low, guttural sound rumbled through the hull, like a mountain exhaling after eons of sleep. The thing in the construct, the thing beyond the boundary, was waking up. And it was looking at them. "Kane," she snapped, gripping the armrests of her chair like they were the only solid thing left in the universe. "If you have a plan, now is the time to tell me." His voice came through the speakers, calm but heavy with urgency. "You can't fight it." Her throat tightened. She had expected as much. "But you can leave." Donovan forced herself to focus. "How?" "The way you came in." Her jaw clenched. "FTL's still non-functional. There's nowhere to—" "You don't need FTL," Kane interrupted. "You need to understand what this place is." The eye within the construct contracted. The massive shape shifted again, its labyrinthine corridors beginning to unwind, unfurling like a cosmic flower. It wasn't just waking up, it was reaching for them. Kane spoke quickly. "The boundary isn't just a wall, it's a path. It doesn't keep things out, it keeps things in. And if you push against it the right way—" Donovan's mind clicked. It wasn't a prison. It was a lock. And locks could be picked. "Helm," she barked. "Hard turn, 90 degrees, relative to nothing." The pilot hesitated. "What?" "You heard me." She didn't have time to explain what she barely understood herself. If the boundary wasn't bound by physics, then neither was the way out. The Triumphant lurched as the pilot obeyed, banking in a direction that shouldn't exist. The ship's frame screamed against the maneuver. The construct reacted. The eye pulsed, and the labyrinth collapsed toward them. A voice, deeper than space, older than time, spoke. "You do not belong." The words weren't heard. They were felt, vibrating through every molecule of their being. For a fraction of a second, Donovan saw something else beyond the boundary. It was infinite, it was hungry, and it was waiting. "Now!" Kane shouted. Donovan slammed her palm against the override panel. The triumphant twisted, folded, ceased to be. And then, with a gut-wrenching snap, the ship reappeared, back in known space. The stars returned. The abyss was gone. The bridge was dead silent. The only sound was the ragged breathing of her crew. Donovan slowly unclenched her fists. "We're clear," the navigator whispered in disbelief. "We're clear." The weight of what had just happened crushed down on her, but she forced herself to stay steady. "Status?" The sensor officer blinked at his screen. "All systems. Nominal." A pause. "Admiral, there's no sign of the construct. No sign of anything." Donovan nodded slowly. "Good." A long silence passed. Then the comms officer hesitantly spoke. "Admiral." He swallowed. "That last transmission from Kane, it cut out the second we crossed the boundary." Donovan exhaled through her nose. Of course it had. She stared at the endless, quiet void before them. Kane had been right. The boundary wasn't just a wall, it was a prison, and they had barely escaped. She turned toward the crew. "Set course for the nearest secure outpost. We need to report what happened." She didn't add what they were all thinking. Not that anyone would believe them. As the ship turned, leaving the impossible horror behind, Donovan cast one last look at the empty space where the construct had been. Had it truly let them go? Or had it simply decided that humanity was not yet worth its attention? For now. She turned away, and the triumphant went home.